Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on subjects such as leadership, visibility, presentation skills, and communication challenges. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to check out how your presentation skills are going by taking our free 4-minute assessment. You can go to speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little support could get you the results you need and the recognition you deserve. Today, I'm recording this in a remote location, so I'm not in my normal audio and video setup, thinking about the things I've learned from 2 years of podcasting. As I'm recording this, it's almost 2 years to the day since the very first podcast the very first episode was broadcast. And I'm thinking how much I have learned. There are 5 main lessons that I've come up with of the many things that I've learned in this podcast. First of all, this is mostly musings and ideas of mine. When I was looking at guests I wanted to feature today or things I wanted to talk about, I actually think they were all interesting. So I hope you could go back and look at some of them. I will post the links to some of the highlights that I mentioned today. One thing I've learned, so the first lesson, is that things evolve and change. I'm recording this at the very end of 2021. We'll be posting this beginning of 2022. And we've all seen the world change and evolve a lot in the last 2 years. I had no idea 2 years from now that we would go into a worldwide epidemic, that we'd go into a worldwide lockdown, that so many things would change in business, in my business, and I would have an opportunity to learn so much from the wonderful guests that I've had. One of the cool things about being a podcast host is that you get to ask questions of really smart people and then learn from them. So that has definitely been one of my strategies. The first lesson, I must say, is my marketing coach, Juliet Dillon Clark, told me that I had to do this. I was resisting getting on video. And she said, you've got to do this. You have to do a live broadcast every week. And you have to do a podcast episode at least 3 times a month. And indeed, it has gotten much easier. It's just like the first time you go out and you do a speech in public. The first couple ones are scary and then you get used to it. Well, that was something I was teaching but not learning. So I've learned that now. I want to thank Juliet Clark for that. I also want to thank Tracy Hazard and Tom Hazard of Parity, because one of the best decisions I made at the beginning was to hire Parity to produce this podcast. I was thinking, well, here are things I could do. I could do some of this myself. But when I thought about the time it would take for me to do all the back of the house work and for my team to do all the work, it's so much easier to have Parity and their team, they've got a big team, to have them do it all for me. All I really need to do is find interesting people and then talk. Well, as you can hear, I can sure talk. The main themes that I've found are presentation skills and how to use this to show your leadership and to get visibility. In some ways, I think of myself as an executive coach who works through the lens of presentation skills. This all fits under the umbrella category of communication. How do we talk to each other? How do we listen or not listen? And what do we do if we aren't being heard? The first theme I found is presentation skills. Fundamentally, what I do as a coach is show people how to present themselves within their organization so that they get heard, and how to use presentation skills, speaking, to do speeches outside your organization, within your industry, to raise your visibility. Because of course, if you are within your company, within your organization, people take you for granted if they see you every day. When you do a speech outside your organization, that gets new attention from the people within your organization who are likely to say, oh, I didn't realize she knew that. Wow. So speaking outside your organization is very important. Learning how to speak so that you're heard inside your organization is usually where we start. It's a two-track thing. Many of the episodes in this podcast have been about presentation skills, especially with me. One of my favorites is, do you feel invisible? Presentation skills to help women be heard, which is one of my most requested workshops. So that's a podcast you can find. I'll post the link in the show notes. You should also look for episodes on using your voice with Cindy Ashton and Alyssa Weinzimmer. How you can up-level your screen presence with Shelley Golden, so that now that we're all on this box, how do you look great? How can you create better slides for your PowerPoint presentations to create raving fans with Bridget Callahan? And of course, the best speech in the world does you no good unless you have a place to give it. So check out How Busy Executives Get Booked with Whitney McDuff. Bridget Callahan and Whitney McDuff are both recent ones. You can find that in the podcast feed. The reason this matters is if you don't speak up, if you don't help yourself, if you don't make yourself heard, no one's going to notice you. And somebody else who is speaking up and who is being noticed is going to get the attention and possibly the promotion, the recognition, the raise, all of that. I know it matters when I get emails, such as a recent one from Caroline in South Africa, who wrote to me on LinkedIn, and she said, "Dear Ms. Bachman, I discovered your podcast about 6 months ago. I really like the idea that I can get results by speaking. I went back to the beginning and saved the episodes that are about being a better speaker, and now I listen to them when I exercise. It took me a while to get up the courage, but I've now spoken in public 3 times, and I know I'm going to do more. Please keep going. I never thought I'd have the nerves to do this. You've helped me so much." Thank you, Caroline. I know you're a subscriber, so I hope you're listening, and I want you to know how much it mattered to me to hear from you that this has really helped you, that this podcast has made a difference. The second big theme that I've focused on and will be focusing on more is the importance of diversity, equity, parity. My specialty is gender parity, helping women be heard, helping women in business get the positions of power that allow them to be good leaders and allow them to make an impact. Of course, once you get to a position of power, even if it's just managing a team for the first time, be sure to reach out and help someone else. Women very often do that. we're trained to share and to help. It's something that is very important to do. Because my specialty is gender parity, I've mostly been focusing on helping women get equal voices in the business world. I know that I can talk about gay and lesbian issues because I'm married to a woman, so I am part of that community. And I recognize that my sort of diversity box that I can check is invisible. I'm a white woman, so you wouldn't know unless just looking at me that I understand what it's like to be in a minority. Thus, I want to say that I am committing myself more and more for the 2022 season, or third year of Speakers Who Get Results, getting more speakers of color, more speakers with diverse attitudes. This is something that I've been doing for the past 2 years, focusing on gay and lesbian, bi and trans speakers in the month of June. That's Pride Month, and something that I have been celebrating for 30 years. So I have brought some wonderful people. I particularly recommend listening to episodes with Cindy Solomon, who's just a great leadership speaker anyway, Lance Dorsey, to talking about how to be intentional with your diversity, and Gina Graham teaches at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford about executive presence. It all comes back to leadership. And that, I think, is really the third theme, the fourth lesson. It all comes back to leadership. How can you be a better leader? How can you be a better communicator? So much of what we talk about is how do you manage people? How can you be a better leader in your team? How can you deal with leaders who are maybe not as functional as you are, better negotiators? It was really hard for me to choose anyone to feature, but I think the other thing I would point out today is be sure to check out the interviews about thought leadership. Because, of course, being a leader is very important. Being a thought leader means that your ideas live beyond you. And that is really an inspiration to create those ideas, to talk about how what you do is going to make the world a better place. I have 2 specific episodes about thought leadership with Bill Sherman and Denise Brosseau. I'll post those as well. One story I particularly love, how all these strategies, these leadership strategies work, is the story of my client, Elena. Elena is the regional manager for an international company, and she's the only woman. She's responsible for a huge territory. It's basically the west coast of the United States, so that's a big territory. So she generates a lot of business. But it's an old company. All the other regional managers are male, and she wasn't being listened to. Plus which, she's a Latina. She's very friendly, she's soft-spoken. She didn't really want to be pushy and bossy. We talked, but the reason why she called me and why she hired me is because on the international conference calls, she was not being listened to. She found that if she could, either the men would talk over her, or if she would suggest an idea, 5 minutes later, somebody else would suggest it as their idea and they would get the credit. This is such an old pattern. And here we are in the 21st century and it's still happening. There are strategies you can use, though. There are things that you can do to counter that so that you get the recognition that you deserve. One of the things that we did, the first strategy we used, was recruiting allies. We analyzed who the true decision makers were and who was it, how did they need to hear what she had to say. Another part that we were talking about is how do you get men to listen to women? She had to analyze who were the people who really cared, who really mattered, What did they respond to? And how could she speak to the issues that mattered to them? She also recruited allies so that when she made a suggestion, every time she spoke up, one of her allies would say, "Thank you, Elena. Great idea. We loved what you had to say." That kind of echoing someone's voice can make a huge difference in how you are perceived. And then, of course, she was an ally back to them. Also, if someone would suggest her idea as their own, her allies were primed to listen for that. So they would say, "Thank you for echoing what Elena just said. Elena, can you elaborate on this?" It made a huge difference. They do now listen to her. She's organized a way to be on the nominating committee. So she's getting more women into the company and lobbying to get more women promoted as regional managers. So we've been working on this for a year and a half now. She is one of 10 women globally who are running regions. She's not the only one, but it still continues. She turns around and recruits other women. It still continues. It is a strategy that works. So the fifth lesson is speak up, raise your voice. It's all about leadership. To review what I just said, the first lesson was things evolve and change, get help. I'm so glad I hired Parity to do this for me. The second lesson is to speak up, to use presentation skills, because speaking is still one of the best ways to make your name known and to position yourself as the person you want to be perceived as, the strategic thinker that you are. Third lesson is diversity and how important it is to have diverse voices, diverse ideas, diverse opinions in an organization. So the more that you can speak up and the more you can bring diverse voices in, the better it will be for everybody. The fourth lesson is leadership, and there's so many details. It's all about leadership. And the fifth one, as I just said, is raise your voice, raise your hand. If you have something to say it. The more you speak up, the more you are heard, the more it is easier for everybody, the better it is for your whole organization, the better it is for the world, and the better it is for the young ones who aren't sure if they should be speaking up. As Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. And I'm so happy you're with me. I'll see you for the next year.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.